you. I'm here with Kristine. Kristine, you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone.
And Kristine is here. I'm really grateful to talk about her journey parenting her teen who identifies as trans. And we're delighted. Hi, Tammy. Welcome. Laura, Brenda. Got people from Los Angeles, Iowa, Pennsylvania. It's a really widely dispersed group. Anyway, let's go to the next slide. I'm going to take care of the housekeeping, and then we're going to turn it over to Kristine. Hi, Julissa from Chicago. Nice to see you. So the ways to engage, you're already using the primary one, which is the chat. And anytime you want to write in the chat, you're welcome. It's yours. You direct it to everyone in the drop-down menu, which everyone is doing. This is so much easier now. And you can ask questions. You can make comments. Just use it as your way to interact with us. And then if you want to talk, you can raise your hand. And at that point, Paul, who's in the background helping us out, making everything go smoothly, will unmute you. And then you will need to unmute yourself and you'll be able to be heard. So we're hoping for a wonderful interactive session and looking forward to everyone participating. Hi, Christina from El Paso. Whenever we do anything at Be Strong Families, Rosemarie from Chicago, we have agreements. And these agreements are in recognition that we co-create this safe space together. So we ask that you speak from your own experience using I statements, that you treat other people the way you want to be treated, that you're here now with us, and if you need a minute, take a minute. If you agree to these agreements, if you could type I agree into the chat, we can get started. Awesome. Awesome. I love this activity. It just warms you up for a conversation. So thank you so much for being here, Kristine. And our Show Your Love for Families. This webinar series is focusing on LGBTQ plus issues. And our annual campaign is happening now. We ask for you to give generously. The money that's being raised is going to go towards us being able to do programming with LGBTQ plus families for other programs who are working with them. They've asked us to create some cafe decks, and we don't have funding to do that. So 100% of the funds are going to go towards that and assisting organizations on a path to becoming LGBTQ plus friendly. I hope to collaborate with the HRC on that because they have an amazing program with certification levels and everything. I talked about it last week. You can check out the webinar from last week. And then also we have a non-binary ages and stages of adolescent development rubric that we'd like to get out into the world. So non-binary and non-cis, heterosexual focused. So hi, Lawan. Wonderful. Victoria, great. Okay, so we've got everyone agreeing, and we have Kristine. And again, Kristine, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for sharing your story. And let's go.
Hi, everyone. I am excited to be here with you all. And it was great to hear Kathy share about what Be Strong Families is doing and to see everybody's hellos in the chat. Folks are from everywhere, so that's really cool. I am from the Pacific Northwest, and Kathy asked me to kind of share with everyone why I'm only using my first name. And that is because we as a family are on our coming out journey. And for those of you who are familiar with people's coming out journeys, they're definitely a process, not an event. And so we're only partially out right now, and it helps to feel a little bit semi-anonymous. And so we're just trying to honor everybody in that space. So that's why it's just my first name and why I'm in generally the Pacific Northwest. But big shout out to Chicagoland folks, because I did live there a long time ago. So it's nice to see folks from there. Next slide, please. I appreciate this quote. I put it on one of my favorites in my own phone a while back because that is definitely how I'm feeling. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the sort of timeline of our family's journey and our child's coming out process and our family's coming out process. Really, it's a family process. And I know it's different for everyone. For us, we were surprised. We have a teenager and she came to us in January. She was born male and she shared with us her first coming out, activity. And we were very caught off guard. So I remember that day well, and it happened in the evening. And I'm going to say a lot because I'm not a public speaker, so please bear with me. Just a parent. It was January 27th, and I'm not going to forget that date because what was on my mind that day was that it was International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And I really wanted to make sure that we as a family reflected on that and had moments of silence and solidarity. And I was super important on that being something I wanted to make happen in the space of our family and dinner time and evening. Another thing that happened that day, next slide, please, is that, so I'm a student right now, and I was super into this particular book, which is not about LGBTQ at all, even though it's got rainbows on it. It's about showing up for your kids. And it's by, I just highly recommend this book to every single person on the planet. It's by Tina Payne Bryson and Dan Siegel. You probably have heard of Dan Siegel by now. If you haven't, he's amazing. So I was all about this book and I was doing a book report on this book and I was just, its language was all up in my head. So my partner, my husband of 24 years, and my child, who I knew with her old pronouns at that point, come home from dinner. They're picking up dinner because I'm busy doing my homework. And I just start getting this like odd vibe. And they bring dinner home and my husband just whispers to me, Ansel has something that he wants to share, and let's eat dinner first. And I know my husband well at this point. So I thought, okay, maybe he's just feeling, he deals with his own anxieties, and maybe he's just feeling a little extra anxiety about whatever the next parenting challenge is and how we're going to navigate it. And so, have this book in my head. I say, before I know that my child's coming out, all right, well, that's cool. We'll just get to practice this. We just want to make sure our child feels safe, seen, soothed, and secure, because this book is all about practicing those 4 S's. And they're true and applicable across the lifespan of parenting. It's especially geared towards younger kids, which makes sense, right? But then it kind of rears its head again in a big way during the teen time.
Safe, seen, what is it, Kristine? Safe, seen?
Safe, seen, as in I see you.
Yeah.
Soothed, as in, we can be calm. We're going to get through this together, even though we don't know what we're doing necessarily. And secure. Like if you do the first 3 S's, thank you. Your child is going to feel more secure, even when something might feel overwhelming in the environment. So that is what I said. Like I'm thinking about the Holocaust. I'm reading this book and I'm sharing this 4 S's thing totally out of context to even knowing what's happening. And then we eat our dinner. And my husband is probably just freaking out. My child just told me that they identify as trans. I don't know what's happening. And I haven't told my wife yet. And so we eat dinner and my child is probably freaking out a little bit too, but I think feels supported, right? Like she came out to us. That's huge in and of itself. If you don't feel safe with your parents, you're probably not going to come out to them. So we eat dinner and then my kid goes back to her bedroom and my husband's like, still whispering, okay, Kristine, okay, will you come out on the back porch with me? I have to tell you something. And I'm like, okay. And I thought it was going to be like, Ansel just confessed that she looked at a grown-up website or whatever. Like that's what ran through my head first. And so we went to the back porch, and he's like, he could barely talk. He was truly in shock. And I'm like, okay, tell me what, tell me. And he says, Ansel just told me that they identify as trans. And I'm like, okay. That was not like, I had my own version of shock, right? If you're a parent and you're not necessarily expecting a journey, you have a version of shock. And I've been learning and reading more about this, and you might have a version of the stages of grief happen, and they might happen in a confusing way. But that's kind of like the first, if you don't know it's coming, a lot of folks do know it's coming, because when they have younger kids, they'll be presenting in a lot of different ways and really articulate about who they feel they are. And that did not happen for us. There's kind of, every pathway is different, but there's sort of two pathways. And one is that you have all that happening during the child's younger years. And the other is that you don't. And then when they're a teen and puberty starts to happen to them, and they're freaking out about it because they don't feel like that, biological sex, it kind of happens in a faster way, and it catches people off guard more, maybe. So ours was the second major pathway. And we kind of had that first moment of shock, right? So in retrospect, I feel incredibly grateful that I was looking at this book because in a nutshell, it helped me remember as a parent, like, okay, I'm going through a big shift. This may be bigger than the things I imagined in reading this book and what might be like a typical parent's journey, but it's still all the same. It's all the same advice, like either for your child, love your child, help them know that they're going to be okay, that you have their back, that this might feel like a strange new world you're venturing into, but we got this. So that's my spiel for the book. Next slide, please.
So what did you do, Kristine?
What did I do? I went to my kid's bedroom and I said, I am so proud of you. Dad just shared your news with me, and I'm just going to be honest, I wasn't expecting it, but I'm so proud of you. And, a day later, I shared with my child that I actually, even though I've been in a hetero-facing marriage for 2 decades, I do identify as bi, and I hadn't told my kid that. So I was like, you know what? This is a good time to share with you, since clearly you're growing up and you know what all these terms are. And I'm not ashamed of it. It's just, I probably would have been confusing to tell you this before because I'm in a marriage and to a man, or both cisgendered, but you're ready. Clearly you're ready. So I just want you to know how I identify in terms of sexual minority status. And it's confusing because I'm married to a man, and that's okay too. Like, it's all okay. Everybody's journeys are different, and they're all okay. And we love and support you. And I'm super proud of you. And then I was like, now can we go watch this little video I found about the Holocaust? That's what I did. That's literally what I did. I think part of me was still in shock and like didn't know how to stay there for too long. And I think we all felt a little awkward and didn't necessarily want to like just talk about it for hours on end, which as a teenager would not want to do anyway, as everyone knows. So we just segued right to watching my little video I wanted to watch about that. Which actually it fit in perfectly, because the video talked a little bit about how clearly the vast majority of the victims of the Holocaust were people who are Jewish, but they also included people who are queer. And so that was part of the video. And it kind of put a heaviness to the moment, but also made it real in terms of people's minority statuses and being discriminated against, and having to always remember to practice and start with love. So that was our family coming out day. Then we kind of laid low for a long time. About a week later, I realized, okay, my husband and I need support because we're freaking out a little bit. Like we need some help processing our own grief journey, kind of. But then beyond the grief, like what do we do next? Where do we go from here? What does our transformation process look like? And can we learn how to parent through this where we don't make like the biggest mistakes here? So we found a therapist for ourselves, the grownups, me and my husband. And we asked my kid at the time, our kid, how are you feeling? Do you feel supported? Do you feel like you want to see a therapist? And she said, no, not right now. And we're like, okay, cool. Like there's nothing wrong with you. So if you don't feel like you want to see a therapist right now, that's great. There's nothing wrong with anybody, by the way, who wants to see a therapist. But this is part of like what I have to get out of my own head, right? So I'm like, we feel like we want support in figuring out how to best support you. So we're going to go find our own resources. I'm super glad you're out of school with a GSA, a Gay Straight Alliance. We are going to go do our own learning because I think you're ahead of us here. And like, that's the kind of language I was using. I was just trying to be there for my kid and be honest. Like, just, this is part of what I like about this Brene Brown quote. Like, authenticity is about, keeping it age appropriate, obviously, but just being honest about where you're at. Like, I'm here for you. I'm proud of you. I support you, but also I kind of don't know what the heck I'm doing in this space. So I'm going to go on a learning journey to figure out how to do it and how to support you. And I think when my kid thought, okay, mom's being weird, mom's always weird, I think she also felt supported in me sharing that, honestly. So since February, my husband and I have been seeing a really awesome therapist once a week. And we just walk through it. We're different, right? We're each different people. So I love books. Kathy probably remembers this about me. So this is another book I like. Probably more people are familiar with Resmaa McKenna's new book, My Grandmother's Hands. I have one of his older books, which is actually about counseling in partner relationships and how to kind of use the journey of conflict in order to help you get to a place of resolution and strong togetherness. Because my husband and I are very different. We come from different backgrounds. We are different people. We have different personalities. And sometimes there's conflict in that. And we went through this huge, many months long tension about what does it mean? This is literally the language we used in our therapy session every single week. What does it mean to foster versus to support our child? Because I felt strongly that we needed to and were supporting our child. And my husband was nervous. He thought if we're doing that, maybe we're accidentally telling them that we want them to be trans or that they should be trans or that we're like, like my husband was in a different space than I was. And I had to learn how to accept that, which I'm still doing, still in the process of learning and doing, and probably always will be. And same for him. But we just had this ongoing tension where my husband's like really nervous that we're accidentally going to like make an outcome happen that he feels is a more dangerous world for our child to live in. And that's part of his grief journey, right? Like he's nervous for our child and he wishes a different world was out there to meet her. And so maybe he wants to imagine that if we do this differently, our child will not, in fact, decide to be trans. So the therapy has helped contain those conversations so that we, regardless of all our other anxieties and different ways of working through this, can both continue to do this. So I also strongly suggest for anyone going through this as a parent or working with parents to just encourage them to find whatever kind of supports work for them. Your mileage may vary in books or in therapy or in support groups, but find the thing that works for you to help you work through your own anxieties and grief so that you can do a better job of being there for your kid, because this is as overwhelming as this is for you as the parent. It's imagine being the child or adolescent going through it. And adolescents are so keenly aware and attuned to what's happening in the world and in their peer groups and in their families. And, find a space where you can get what you need, like fill your bucket, however that looks, so that you can be there for your kid, however that looks, and you're going to make mistakes. And that's okay, as long as they know you're doing your best. Next slide, please. Oh, this is very small. It's hard for me to read, so I apologize because I made the slide. So things are going to happen in the world that you're like, oh, this helps me and I'm going to use it, like use whatever works, right? So in October, Jamie Lee Curtis, who I'm, she's married to Christopher Guest. I'm a fan of both of them. Christopher Guest makes hilarious movies. If you happen to be a fan, you're like, you get that, right? If you're not, no worries. Something else will speak to you. But Jamie Lee Curtis's child, young adult, came out to her this year as a trans female, and it caught Jamie Lee Curtis off guard. So I took that moment, because my husband is a super fan of Christopher Guest, which is the father and Jamie Lee Curtis's husband. Like, okay, I'm going to use this as a way in to help my husband feel supported, and like it's other people are going through this. It's okay. We're okay. You're okay. It's all exciting. So I loved this quote from People magazine that Jamie Lee Curtis said when her daughter came out to her. It's speaking a new language. It's learning new terminology and words. I'm new at it. So she's acknowledging, she's being authentic. I am not someone who is pretending to know much about it, and I'm going to blow it. I'm going to make mistakes. I would like to avoid making big mistakes, which I identified with all that too. Like, acknowledge that you're human. You want to be there for your kid. You love your kid. Like at bottom, it's all about, I love my kid. And I'm going to learn how to be there for them. And let's see. I'll just stay here for a minute. So we stayed in our bubble through the spring, as it were, which was fairly easy because of COVID. We all got vaccinated. Our daughter graduated from middle school. She came out to her friends, who were super supportive, which was awesome. And they did graduation together and hung out as much as they could during, COVID. They were all just starting to get vaccinated. Then we all got vaccinated. We had that moment of celebration before Delta reared its head. We went down to visit my brother, who happens to live in San Francisco, and we went in June. So San Francisco during Pride Month, it was great. Ansel felt supported by the whole city. So that felt amazing. My family didn't know. So I did this little, I'm like, okay, Kristine, how can you do this where you're not going to out your child who's not ready to share either, but just like be supportive, and your child knows this. So I found out about the Human Rights Campaign, which Kathy had talked about a little bit ago. So I ordered their t-shirt, this one. This is the t-shirt I ordered. The little trans colors, united against hate. And I'm like, I'm just going to wear this t-shirt. I'm going to be all about this t-shirt on our trip. Kind of curious if my family would ask me about the t-shirt, and Ansel's just like, okay, mom's being weird again. So nobody asked me. We have all these pictures that we shared to our little family. We have like a little private family photo sharing thing. And I'm wearing the shirt in the pictures. My kids wearing their rainbow mask in the pictures. Nobody asks us anything. It's basically like a don't ask, don't tell environment in my family, as far as I can tell. So that happened. We get home, we just kind of hang out some more. It's summertime, it's relaxed. We go to a family reunion, and it's more of the same. Don't ask, don't tell. And it's beginning to feel really awkward, frankly, because everybody in my family is using my kid's old pronouns. And she hasn't changed her name at this point. So she's still using her name, which is, traditionally identified as male. And to us, we know her with her new pronouns, and we're using them. And when we're with family, we basically go through this weird dance where my husband and I avoid using any pronouns. And my family, we hear all the pronouns from my family, and they're sounding increasingly weird to us. Like there's just this dissonance. And so my husband and I start to get to the point with our therapist's approval, because she's like, your kid has to understand your people too. She's a teenager. She's very me-centric. That's age appropriate, totally normal. She has to understand that, it's okay to understand that it's hard for your parents sometimes too. So you can legitimately start asking her more often, hey, how are you feeling about wanting to share your pronouns with grandma and grandpa? Or how are you, it's okay to ask her that. It's okay to like push her a little bit in that way. And while she's still feeling supported. So we start doing that more. And I think she just starts getting, typically teenager tired of us. And eventually she's like, one day I ask and I get a different answer. And she's like, yeah, you know what? I'm ready to share my pronouns with grandma and grandpa on your side, mom. And you know what? Grandma always says we've got all these grand boys in the family. Grandma always said she wanted a granddaughter. So I think she's going to be excited. And I was like, yes, okay. Just so you know, she's also a little bit older. She might be both excited and confused. But that only happened very recently for us in October. So, and we very explicitly heard from our child that she was not ready to tell my husband's side of the family, because the culture there is a little bit different. And there's folks who are, so I just want to take a little sidebar moment here, and people might want to talk about this later, but there's all sorts of churches, and tons of churches and religious organizations out there are very affirming. So that's good to know if you're in a space where you're navigating all those tensions. And we have personally found one that works really awesome for us. But my husband's side of the family is really affiliated with a non-affirming religious community, which for us is a bummer. And we're a little nervous still on how to navigate that part of our journey. So I'm just sharing that to be, again, honest and authentic. And our kid already sensed that, even though we're not sitting here talking trash about our family at all. We don't really talk about that. We just know it's hard. So she says, I'm not really ready to come out to that side yet. And we're like, yeah, totally fair. We respect that. We support you. And we also just acknowledge that it's hard for all of us. And it's super hard for my husband, because he still can't just be relaxed around his family yet. So we're all trying to support each other as a family. And now we've got this huge network on my side who is supporting us as well, which feels great. So we've got our friends.
How did grandma respond, Kristine?
Grandma, so my husband and I decided to tell my parents with Ansel's approval before Ansel said anything to them. Like, we wanted to kind of let them have their initial shock moment, not in Ansel's presence. So we just shared with Ansel, like, we're going to talk to them, and then we're going to all talk together, and we're excited to share with them. That'll give us opportunities to answer any questions that they have. And that just felt right for us. So it's going to be different for everybody. You're going to kind of like feel your way through it. It's like that quote at the front of my slides from Joseph Campbell. You're literally feeling your way through the path. And we're not the vanguard of this, right? Like, people have been going through this for so long now, but still for me, it feels like I am at the vanguard of it, because it's my own little universe. It's my own family, and it's one step at a time. So we decided that would feel good. And we had a little Zoom call with my parents. We ended up having to do, because they often are not like together in their home. They're off doing their own little things. So we told my mom first, and then we told my dad, and then we talked to him together. And they were both positive. My mom was a little more like, oh, okay, this is weird. So I just like, listen to her have that. And then my dad immediately was like, wow, we are so proud of Ansel. We super support him. So he's immediately using supportive, prideful language, and yet continuing to use old pronouns, which I kind of also get to, knowing him and his background and where he's from. So I'm like, okay, this is actually great. This is what support feels like from my family and where they're going to be immediately out of the gate. And I am super grateful for that. And then it took and then my mom texted Ansel and said, Ansel, I love you so much. I'm super proud of you. And I just want you to know I love you. And I didn't know for like a week that she had sent Ansel that text directly. I was super excited when I heard about it, because she kind of went into her own little grief place and then didn't talk to me for a week. Not like, I didn't feel like she was mad at me or anything. She just does that when she's having hard emotions. So I kind of was like, okay, this is hard for me, but I get it. This is what she does. So she kind of went into her little cave for a week. And then we talked on the phone about a week later. She finally picked up the phone and we just had a great chat about all the things that we talk about usually. And also about, oh, how are you experiencing knowing Ansel's coming out news? And by a week later, she was awesome. She said, well, my grandma's 94. I told your Aunt Diane, I hope that's okay. I'm like, yes, I kind of figured when I told you the cat would be out of the family bag because you're kind of the family gossip. So yes, it's all good. Aunt Diane's great. We're both like on board supporting each other. We think we shouldn't tell your grandma. So my grandma's 94 and she's got dementia right now. And it's pretty mild. Like she still lives at home with support, but she's going through that, I forget everything everybody just told me part of her journey with that. And I was like, yes, that's okay. You will be having to share this news over and over again with grandma, like literally every time you talk to her, and she's going to be extraordinarily confused because she's 94. So fine, let's not tell her. We'll make sure Ansel understands that. Ansel totally got that. And is really close with my grandma. So it's all good. And we're kind of just getting more casual and jokey about that. And it feels good. So I'm excited. They're coming over for Thanksgiving. We're going to have our first big family Thanksgiving since our family coming out on my side. And since COVID, like last year's Thanksgiving was not big because of COVID. So I'm excited for a lot of reasons. And, the last part of our journey, we have only recently started engaging with our pediatrician. Like we took this 9 months or whatever to be in our cocoon. Noah and I are getting support on how, oh yes, the Oprah wisdom. Thank you. I love these Oprah quotes. They help me because, Oprah. And just a good reminder that like wherever you at, help your child and the youth in your family like feel like that's where they can be them. However confusing it might be for the family at times, just help them feel super supported. And it goes back to those 4 S's too. And then for me and for my husband, the power of changing your perspective. You don't have control over everything. You don't know everything. And if you're willing to just kind of roll with it, it can be pretty cool and exciting. So we had our annual pediatrician checkup appointment, and I try not to do what it coulda, shouldas, but part of me is like, gosh, if we'd been a little more comfortable earlier, I could have scheduled this earlier. But no, I was just sticking with we go once a year. Let's go once a year. Nobody's in crisis, which was true. So I guess it is what it is, and it's all good. So we went to the pediatrician, and Ansel was very ready to share with her pediatrician, who just happens to be the LGBTQ liaison on staff, like the person who knows the most about this community. So I'm like, yes, great, awesome. We already have, that's our doctor. We already have a relationship with them. I know not everybody's going to not have that be part of their journey, but I felt super grateful, and it just was total happenstance. So if you don't feel comfortable with your family doctor, maybe kind of explore. There's tons of affirming. I mean, basically all doctors at this point are, because the medical establishment has really gotten on board and understands the data about when kids are supported and they're supported by their families, their outcomes are so much better. So our family doctor was great. He totally understood what like we're going through and what was proud of Ansel, and just talked about, where are you at with your coming out process? What do you want? And she shared that like she wants puberty blockers. So this is where my husband starts to freak out, right? And so, okay, let my husband be part of his authentic journey. We're all good. The pediatrician's supporting us. We're just like widening our window of support. My child's not necessarily going to get what they want immediately. We're all going to just do our best, and we're living through it, and we're following the recommendations, and this is exactly where we're at right now.
What are puberty blockers? I mean, it sounds obvious, but what are puberty blockers? Like, what do they do?
Right. So they are, oh, my dog's scratching an itch. I apologize if you hear that. They're assigned by a medical professional. Hi, Robin. Thank you. I'm just sitting here blabbering, so it's nice feedback to get that in the chat. They are a medical professional decides if they're appropriate for your child or teen, and they basically just put the pause button on puberty continuing to unfold as it would otherwise. And it gives you more of an opportunity to kind of think about what you might want for yourself and your future trajectory. And it's totally reversible. It's just a pause button. And it's still scary if it's not a world you understand and you don't know anything about it, and it feels like a medical intervention. It feels scary to a lot of people. So I'm super grateful that like the medical community, the pediatric community totally gets what's happening with all of these potential interventions that are helpful and in many cases life-saving. So my kid I was super proud of her. She's just like self-advocating, and she's pretty casual about it. And I know she's nervous, and I'm like, great. So we're going on the next step of our journey. So the pediatrician referred us to get a bone scan in her hand, just a super simple x-ray. We did it at the Children's Hospital, which is a really positive and affirming hospital in our town. And so we literally just got the results back for that. And the results show, yeah, I mean, she's like midway, a little bit further than midway through puberty. It makes sense that she's freaking out because she's not identifying with her sex assigned at birth, and she is in the window where puberty blockers probably would make sense. So let's go through the next part of the journey, which is to have her talk to a licensed behavioral health person who can see if she's, ready for this next part of the journey, and if she really, really wants that, given all the pros and cons, because no medical intervention is 100% risk-free, and you need to be fully informed. And as a teenager, you do have that capacity to understand how to be fully informed, and yet you're also still young. So like they just assess for all of that, like the individual's readiness, the family's readiness, and how to best support the child and help them, maximize their health. And so that's where we're at now. We're like calling therapists to try to get on somebody's schedule. And
wow. I mean, practically, it seems like, okay, so if you do puberty blockers, then she stays a child in certain ways. Yeah.
Well, she is in puberty. So she's already in adolescence. So she stays in that part of adolescence. Like she definitely
pause for. I mean, how long can you safely pause for?
Yeah. The last thing I read that we got from the medical professionals was like maybe 2 to 3 years. It depends. Again, the answer is always, it depends. It depends on the individual and their particular growth patterns. And
how does if, okay, so 2 to 3 years, she wants to make changes to her body. Yes. So yes or no? No.
Well, currently that's what she wants. Right now, the recommendations are, I know that everyone's journey is different, and a lot of, like Jazz Jennings, a lot of people are on TV and stuff who have had different pathways and had access to those pathways, but the generally established consensus is for irreversible medical surgical interventions to your body, they generally want you to wait till you're 18. And I know every state's different too, so it's super confusing right now. But I guess my point is it's not like your child says, hey, I want this. And then all of a sudden the gates are open and you immediately do all the things that you want and you can't change it. That is not what happens. There's so many hurdles basically to make sure people are, in the right space for them, that this is actually going to be the best thing for you. And there's like a whole team that you have to work. Like it's very much a slow process. So it's going to be a while even before we may have puberty blockers be part of our journey. And she's already in puberty, so she'll be further along in puberty at that time if it were to happen. And then it would just make it so that her natural male occurring hormones wouldn't keep revving up, which is going to put her more in a sense of crisis. Like she doesn't want to have all this more hair all over her and, all the things that if you don't align with that biological sex are just going to help you keep having you feel more and more upset about being in this body in the world. So it just slows all of that down. And it's, as soon as you were to stop that, you would just start the process again. It'd be like a person who normally had like a later puberty. That's really all it is.
So here's the question though, does a person, if she continues at 18 and she wants to have surgery and complete the transition, does she have to go through puberty as a male before she can do that? Or does it just, or does she just take different hormone? This is just, I'm asking questions because I don't know, and I figure you probably do.
Yeah. So, I don't want to accidentally give the wrong information because I'm a parent. I'm not a medical expert. But from what I understand is you would go from puberty blockers, and then if you wanted to continue along your path towards having your gender align or your biology align more with your identified gender, you would take hormone therapy to basically go more through the puberty of the other gender. But you're already, so in our case, because our child learned this about herself, or, it came to her awareness more, and she came to us as a teen, like at 13, it's different than, I know, again, your mileage may vary, everybody's different. Some kids know early on how they feel. And if you're starting the whole process at a different stage, I think the trajectory might be a little bit different working with medical professionals. So I just can't say that I know the answer. But for us, it's kind of like there's still puberty, and part of it happened with this biology, and part of it was augmented with this other biology, mimicking the other biology based on the medical treatment, the hormone medicine.
And I just wonder, because I assume that your mind, even though the puberty blockers are blocking the physical changes to your body, her mind will continue evolving. Yes, like, because that's another maturation process, right?
Right. Yeah. And it just puts you on a different timeline. So already in the quote unquote natural world where nobody's getting any intervention, there's this whole spectrum of when people go through puberty already. Mm-hmm. So it just, as an individual, it just changes your particular timeline for that. And maybe it's now more like what another person's would have been naturally. So there's already like this huge spectrum of how each individual experiences what is considered just like the natural progression of puberty anyway. Like for me, a lot of it for me happened at age 12. For another person, a lot of it happens like they're a late bloomer and it happens at 17, It's already different for everybody.
Yeah, got it. Well, we're getting to the end, I think. This is the resources part that your resources for people.
This is just a few that I found helpful. Oh, thank you so much. Now people have the the URLs to click on there. I have found these resources helpful. There's a lot out there. Where I'm excited because my husband just signed us up for our local PFLAG, which is a parents. This is a support group that was founded a number of years ago when more of the parents were identifying a need to learn how to parent their sexual minority children. So the acronym actually used to be Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, or Parents and Family, I think, something like that. And they go by PFLAG now, and a lot of their support is for families with transgender members. So I'm super excited because my husband took the initiative to sign us up for their support group tomorrow. And we've looked at their literature online, which has been helpful, but we are now finally ready to go be more in support group land.
Cool. And how is your child's Ansel's acceptance at school and socially? I mean, you said her friends are very supportive, but has she experienced, and have you been helping her through any other conflicts socially?
Yeah. So she's part of a friend group of 4, I like to call them the Fab Four, and they've been super tight since elementary school. And they're extremely supportive. So I'm really grateful about that. And there's, 2 of them born male and 2 of them born female. So they already were it's not just all one biological sex. It's a great group. I love it. And that helps her feel like I can do this at school. The school community, it's funny, we're in a progressive part of the country, and we're also in a very supportive, affirming school community, which is awesome. But I'm noticing a lot of the don't ask, don't tell atmosphere. So, and Ansel's actually told me to okay, Mom, I want you to stay. I do not want you to overassert helicopter parent me here through this. I got this, and I'm going to come out to my teachers. You don't need to tell the school right now that we want to change my pronouns on record. I'm going to tell you when I'm ready for that. And the school has a GSA, Gay Straight Alliance. I'm always confused if I'm getting the acronym right, because I know they changed it. But anyway, it's a safe place. It's an affirming, supportive place. And I'm super glad the school has that. I know a lot of schools don't. So you can actually look up GSA, just Google GSAs, or go to GLAAD, GLAAD, which I did not put in my resources here, and figure out how to help start one of those in your school, if that's a possibility. And I know Human Rights Campaign also has a lot of resources on their site, which I should have put their site on here. I don't know why I didn't. Kathy could maybe put that in the chat too. They have a lot of resources about how to help work with your school. I know depending on the community you live in right now, that can be tricky. I totally get that. But there's tons of resources online, and there's also support groups online, and ways to navigate through it depending on what the environment might be like in your location.
Thank you so much, Kristine. And now we're going to open it up to questions. So we've got at least 5 minutes for questions if people have them. If not, I'll continue asking questions. People in the chat, and you got a lot of love in the chat, Kristine. People very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story. This is so helpful. Your words and spirit are inspirational. Your child is lucky to have you for her mom.
Thank you.
Yes. So questions from the group? Brenda wants to speak. So
no, you should be able to speak.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Hi, this is Brenda. Thank you so much for your experience. And it's so funny because my parents are from El Salvador. So I have that old school thinking, and then I'm a child development major, and I'm doing this for a class, right? Because that's so it's so funny how my progressive mind and my old school mind clash, right? Because some of it I'm like, really, you're doing all of this for your child? What if your child at the end of it says, oh, never mind, I feel like I'm, back to feeling a male, da, 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 da. Then what do you do? So all these things, and thank you for giving us your perspective, because I feel like I would be lost. Now, my question is, your child knows, like, you said you had to learn everything. Now, is your child learning the same thing, or does he or she know what to do already? I mean, do you see what I'm saying? Like,
Yes, I do. Yes, thank you for that question, Brenda. Yeah, that whole dissonance of like just recognizing I'm from a culture, and the culture my child is part of, just even just by definition of what year we're living in, is just different from mine. So there's so much dissonance on so many levels. I was surprised early on in this journey at how much my child already knew, because she's trying to understand herself. So she's already seeking out resources, and she found a lot of supportive resources in the world, at the library, online. And of course, my husband's like, oh no, the internet's making our child trans. Right? Like, that's sort of the mindset we come from, which I get. And like, no, my child's actually seeking these out to help her understand what she's already feeling. So she knew a lot, and it helped me on my journey, because she would bring something up and I'd be thinking, okay, I vaguely know what you're talking about, so I'm just going to like pretend for a second here. I'm not going to be as authentically honest as I could be and just say, I don't know what you're talking about. So I just kind of nod my head, like do the cool parent thing, and then I go look it up. And then I do my learning. And I'm like, oh, wow, my child already knows that she is looking for this. And the more I learn, the more I see is already out there, like libraries, so supportive. And I identify as like a introverted, geeky librarian sort, but no, I'm like, the librarians are way ahead of me on this.
Another question, Kristine says, Kristine is asking you, how did the conversation go with your other children, if you have any?
Oh, that's a good question. I happen to not have any other children, but I do have nephews that we're close to. So the first of my siblings. So I did this whole triangulation in my head of, okay, well, we're going to come out to my family. How am I going to help it go as smoothly as possible? I'm going to start with my sister, because my sister already has a lot of friends who identify as lesbian. She played, this is going to be a stereotype, so I apologize, but there's always a little bit of truth to some stereotypes. She played college basketball. She identifies as heterosexual, but a number of her very good friends identify as gay. And so she's already been on a learning journey of like how to learn how to be affirming for people she loves, and learning more inside of her about what that means. Because we come from a very small, very conservative town. So I went right to my sister first, and I have nephews, her kids, who are the same age as my child and who grew up playing together. Like, we hung out all the time, and we hang out all the time. And we haven't as much during COVID, so that's been hard. So I came out to her first, and she and I kind of worked together through how we were going to like best support letting her kids know, because it could be confusing. One's 13, well, just turned 14, and the other one's 12. And they were great. Like, I went there first because I thought my sister's going to know probably more than I would how to do this. And I'm extraordinarily grateful that that was a resource in my family, and that she's been helpful now that we've come out to her. And so she's also an elementary school teacher. She had like all the tools. If anybody could have the tools, she had them, of how to talk to her kids, because her kids were, again, like, the first feeling was shock. Like, what? No, he's a boy. So by the time we got there in October to like just hang out together, she had already helped them like know how to, if they have really obviously tricky questions, just try to come at them from a place of love and authenticity and curiosity, and knowing that Ansel doesn't have to talk about it if she doesn't want to. And you know what? They just went right back to their let's play Nerf.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Kristine. I think we're wrapping up now. So coming to the next slide, what do we want to amplify coming out of this? I think when Christina and I and Paul were talking before, we said it's basically about love. Could be about joy, could be about acceptance. What do you support? Lawan says amplify support. What else would we like to amplify? What are you hearing from Kristine?
Ooh, I like that.
Amplify
The four
S's.
S's. Yay.
The 4 S's, yes. Victoria said, please come back and talk to us again later in your journey, I guess.
2 years later, where are we at?
Yeah,
Thank you
it's
all
really
so much.
interesting. I don't know if you know the statistics or if there are statistics based on what Brenda was saying about, I mean, I remember adolescence being a very confusing time. And I think that the way that sex and gender are typified, in my day, like there were a lot of things that I didn't identify with about being female, like about being a woman, things that I didn't like. I wonder what I would do with that now. Do you know what I mean? If I were a young person now, and I wonder, if there is more, like there's a lot of things that I'm trying to figure out when I'm an adolescent, and relating to a changing body is difficult for a lot of adolescents, period,
Yes.
So I wonder if there is, if there's, what we hear is that trans people know, and once it's only coming out. But the question is, do you know if there's research about what Brenda was talking about
I
people
do.
changing their
So, so the research that I have found out about and talked to our doctor about is that for kids who identify as gender nonconforming or gender diverse before puberty, many of them end up feeling affirmed in their biological sex as they were born. They like go back to that. Some continue on to a journey of identifying with a different gender, and some go back. But for somebody who comes out to themselves after the horrors or whatever, as you call it, of puberty start happening, at that, for kids who discover that about themselves at a later time when puberty is happening, actually more of them continue on the path towards a different alignment of gender, whatever that looks like. It could end up being non-binary. We don't know. That of course that's what my husband's hoping for, because for him that's easier, right? So what we are all learning how to do is just understanding like what's hard for us, where are our own biases, what's easy and hard for us, and how do we just keep coming back to, we love you unconditionally. This is your journey. This is your life. We support you.
That's so beautiful, Kristine. Thank you so much. Next slide, Paul. So show your love for families, donate to our annual campaign. There's a link in the chat. And then next slide, Paul. Next week we are doing Riding the Corona Coaster with Cassia, Ida, and Serena Sashington. That is you. So these are the English. This is the English webinar. That Cassia was here last year at the beginning of when COVID was happening, and we all just feel like we have to talk about masks and vaccinations and our holiday plans and being over it or being still scared or whatever, where we are. So this is just a conversation about where we are riding the Corona coaster. And then Tuesday we have Spanish. And then Wednesday we're going to have what does family mean to you? So that's another just conversation. So join us next week for our webinars or anytime your schedule allows. So glad, Victoria, that your schedule allowed. Victoria says, thank you so much for talking to us today. I feel very blessed that my schedule changed to the last minute, which allowed me to be here. And Kristine says, I love what Kristine said earlier, start with love, amplify, start with love. And Robin says, thanks again, Kristine. So appreciate your transparency and sharing. Have a great day. Encourage you all to have a great day. And thank you again, Kristine, for being here. We appreciate you. I'm sure your help, this is going to be helping a lot of people. So we appreciate that as well.
Thank you for listening.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Everyone, thank you. We're going to be closing it out. BeStrongFamilies.org is where you can find more information for upcoming events. Thanks again.